Yes, Ambassador to Israel, Ambassador Jack Lew, thank you for granting us this interview.
Good to be with you.
I wonder, when you first heard about the ICC prosecutor decision, what was your first reaction?
My initial reaction was that I was surprised because my understanding had been that the prosecutor was going to be coming to Israel and was going to be collecting facts and information, and that it was a process that was still ongoing. And as Secretary Blinken's statement yesterday reflected, we only learned of the decision at the same time that the staff for the prosecutor informed Israel that he wasn't coming on a planned trip to prepare for next week's visit by the prosecutor. It's an outrageous thing to compare a democratic country that's fighting a war against an enemy that committed the worst acts of terrorism and violence against the Jewish people since the Holocaust, to compare the two in any way. There's a war that's being fought on a battlefield defined by Hamas. They're hiding behind women and children. It's a circumstance where, after Israel has spent so much effort providing humanitarian assistance, they're being accused of using, starvation as a weapon of war. It's kind of upside down.
So will the administration support the suggestion to have sanctions towards the ICC?
So we're sitting here today not even 24 hours after the warrants were issued. I've spent most of the hours since the warrants were issued.
Our clock is speedy.
Your clock is speedy, yes. But I've spent most of the time since then making sure that we responded quickly, strongly, because what we need to do right now is level set what the government of the United States views as being, outrageous about this action. We'll have time to look at what next steps are. But for today, my objective today is for there to be no ambiguity that we consider this to be an outrageous and shameful decision to issue these warrants and to compare Israel to Hamas. And that doesn't mean we haven't had questions about some of the things that have gone on in this war. But let me just be very clear. Having conversations about how to do that in the best way you can under terrible circumstances that Hamas created is not the same thing as saying that somehow denying humanitarian assistance is being used as a tool of war. It's just absurd.
Did you agree with Prime Minister Netanyahu's remarks yesterday that it is moral equivalence, have an equivalence between President Roosevelt and Hitler?
I'll leave the historical comparisons for others to make. I'm looking at a situation right here, right now, where unequivocally, I think that it is just wrong to draw any moral equivalency between the actions of Hamas and the actions of the government of Israel. The president said from the very first days of the war, we will support Israel fully. He came here himself to not just provide support, but to provide psychological support for the country.
Does this also mean that the U.S. will support Israel in those manners at the UN Security Council? Regarding the ICC and regarding the ICJ.
I'm not sure that they will come to the UN Security Council.
But if...
what I can say is that the U.S. has consistently supported Israel by either voting against and vetoing or improving and abstaining. And if we get to a point where something that's unacceptable comes to the Security Council, that's a place we have action we can take. The fact that he made the decision to issue the warrants before he actually took that trip and took advantage of having the facts in front of him before he reached a conclusion, I've used the word before, it's outrageous.
I wonder, do you see the evacuation of 800,000 Palestinians from Rafah as something that changed the U.S. perspective towards a massive military operation?
I think that on the moving of people, a lot of people have moved. There's still several 100,000 people who are in Rafah. There's still work to be done in the areas that people have moved to make sure that all of the basic needs are met, but there's a process underway where that's certainly something that we expect the government of Israel to follow through on. I can tell you this, when the president spoke to this issue, he made clear that the first step, the first operation, did not cross a line. I'm not going to speak in advance about actions that have not yet been announced or taken. I think this process of understanding each other is very important. And I hope that we continue to have those kinds of conversations, because my view is the relationship between the U.S. and Israel remains rock solid, the commitment remains ironclad, and we have no interest in there being daylight.
Mm-hmm. Regarding the Saudi plan, is there a scenario when the administration will go forward with the Saudis without Israel normalization within?
You know, I think if you look at the negotiations with Saudi Arabia, there are very important objectives for the region. Mm-hmm. And normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia is central to that. I think we saw just a couple of weeks ago, you know, almost a month ago, or about a month ago, time's going fast and slow at the same time, you know, what the value to the region, to Israel, to the world is of having moderate Arab countries and the West allied, with Iran isolated with its proxies of Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis.
But perhaps Iran is easier to this government than the Palestinian issue.
Well, what I was going to say is the question now will come, is there an agreement on the importance of the strategic objective of normalization? I hope there is, but that's going to be the issue that will determine whether or not the whole package can come together. And I hope that when the balance is considered between finding a pathway to talking about Palestinian governance that doesn't end up with a militarized Palestinian, you know, state, that doesn't end up creating a situation where Israel is exposed to threats that it can't protect itself against, whether getting into that conversation is more or less problematic than the long-term strategic benefits of having normalization of relations with Saudi Arabia, and then having an alliance of all the moderate Arab countries and Israel, with Iran being isolated. In my view, that's the ultimate defeat for Hamas. It's the ultimate defeat for Iran, and it is of great importance. But it's going to be a decision that the government of Israel and the people of Israel have to make, and it's not helped by the events of these last few days. Last
question, Ambassador. There are almost 230 days that the Israeli hostages are being into Hamas captivity. And I wonder, do you believe that Israel, the U.S., Qatar, and each and every partner in this region are doing all they can in order to bring them back to Israel?
You know, a day doesn't go by when I don't start and end the day thinking about what more can we do to help make things possible for there to be an agreement to bring hostages home. You know, we have pressed all parties to stay engaged. We've tried to come up with bridging ideas when there are differences. We're going to continue doing that. I think that Israel made a very forward-leaning set of decisions in offering what it did in the last round. We were very public in saying Hamas should just say yes.
But they didn't.
They didn't. They said yes, but, and their buts were pretty big, you know, differences. We're going to have to keep pushing. You can't stop talking. There are lives on the line that are precious, and time is of the essence. So we consider this to be an ongoing process where we're going to push forward. All the strategic issues that we spent a few minutes talking about are much more easily resolved if we deal with the humanitarian crisis of releasing the hostages and having the war in Gaza reach a quiet period than the absence of that.
But perhaps it means the, ending the war without defeating Hamas.
There's no disagreement between the United States and the State of Israel that Hamas must be defeated as a political and military governing power and force. We also have made clear that you don't defeat Hamas by eliminating everyone who's in Hamas, and you have to have something to come in after. This is going to be a very hard set of conversations, and not just conversations, it's very hard circumstances. But that's the only way that this war is going to end in a place that leaves Israel and the region with a better future, and God willing, with the hostages coming home very soon.
Ambassador Liu, thank you for this interview.
Thank you.